there are multiple factors in terms of how does it come about that even to this day, we are still grappling with issues, particularly when it comes to psychosocial support systems at the school system, rather at the school level. Basically, what is happening is that I think when we ventured into the dispensation of democracy, there were certain priorities that were actually put at the fore. And this also has led to a possibility of certain aspects that are important being neglected. So what is happening now in terms of school social workers, this is long overdue, but as it is happening in many other respects in our society, we are very reactive when it comes to certain issues. We wait for things first to fall apart, and then only then we start acting so that we can curb the damage that has already been caused. So this is really something that is very desirable because we really need to know that our schools are not operating in isolation. They are part of society, they are part of communities that we live in, and both learners and staff come from communities that are infested with problems, very, very serious problems, and they carry those problems into their school premises. So it is really very important that social workers need to form part of the schooling system so that where necessary, when problems or issues and challenges rear their head, they can be tackled with immediate effect. So I think indeed, as you have indicated, also the system that we come from, we know that in many respects, many schools, particularly in townships and so on, were neglected in terms of capacitating them to be able to deal with any challenges that they can be coming across. So having school social workers is indeed something that is very, very urgent. It's something that is necessary so that we can start really dealing with issues as they emerge.
And I want to look at those issues. Social workers, I believe, not only place a high priority on ethical conduct, but as custodians of the Children's Act, they also have a distinct legal obligation towards children. What's the incidence that we are seeing now? As you mentioned that psychosocial services that social workers offer, it's only part of the solution because they're a microcosm of society. Would we be placing too much responsibility on them to say they must deal with some of these things that we saw, the incident of children bullying a teacher? We spoke about 15 or 14-year-olds, one stabbing the other to death or something to that effect. There's high drug use, etc.
Indeed. I think we shouldn't really use the service and the intervention by social workers as a band-aid. The responsibility of raising children actually starts within families. So that's where it should all start, because once you have not been able to lay a proper foundation at a family level, it becomes a little bit challenging when now children go to school and they start to interact with other adults in the form of educators. And if really there were certain things that were not entrenched in their upbringing, it becomes very difficult to be able to manage them. So as much as social workers are really adding value by rendering services that are required, and we know that the capacity is not enough. We know that not every school actually has got a social worker. You might find that there's one social worker per district, which can be very much overwhelming. Therefore, this really calls, again, for the intervention and active involvement of parents and adults who are living with these children. Because if they are able to instill self-discipline or any form of discipline in these children, at least it assists the teachers to also be able not focus on managing the conduct of the children in the school premises, but to be able to focus on teaching and learning as the core business that they should be doing. But indeed, with social workers also being in the fold, that will assist in being able to perhaps nip certain problems into in the bud, really, so that they are not escalating, because the absence of proper and professional expert intervention that social workers can be able to bring about can be able to reverse whatever that could have been worse by rendering service to this to the learners, who might be really harboring a lot of emotional distress, which then manifest in the conduct that might not be proper.
I want to reflect on the MDGs, for instance. It's been said that more social workers in the school system could help in achieving those Millennium Development Goals with regard to the provision of services to children and protecting them from harm. Bullying has become a phenomenon that almost seems like we are unable to stop it as a society. Share your views about practically, because sometimes it's a societal thing in terms of what some say are ethical dilemmas, but are they really, or is it not a practice that we've been exposed to, psychosocial services and seeking help? Can you explain to those who are watching the work, the worth as well that social workers can bring?
Social workers are very essential. Really, they can be very central in terms of being able to contribute to at least deal with these challenges. But we know that when children or anyone, when they bully others, they are actually at some point having been bullied themselves. So children actually reflect what is happening to them. First of all, when a child bullies others, I think it's important not to ostracize that particular child, but instead dig a little bit deeper to see what could be leading to that kind of behavior. Because sometimes they make other children outlets of their own misery and of their own emotional pain. But indeed, social workers can contribute massively. It's very important, though, that this should not only be something that's conceptual. It should be translated into action. We know that in many respects, we might be having good policies on paper, good intentions, good programs that are conceptualized. But then it becomes a challenge when they have to be implemented. So it's very important that really the department and government really makes this a priority, because we are at a point where now we need to really tackle this very, very vigorously. Because as things stand, we can see that every single day, every now and again, we hear that there are incidents that are happening at schools, and quite often these usually become even more nastier than before.
Just finally, what do you think is the source of the kind of violence and just wayward behavior that we're seeing from learners at school, which, you know, if you go generations back, would have been inconceivable?
Today's children have got access to a whole lot of things that in the past were not accessible. There's a lot of exposure that actually happens. We know that technology can be helpful in empowering and in assisting learners and children to access information for self-development. But we know also that these gadgets do have some content that when children are exposed to it, it becomes some sort of something that they become kind of affected very negatively because now they start embracing what they see there, particularly violence and aggression. And also in our society, in our communities, we see every day when there are protests, you will always find that there's violence that accompanies that. So this behavior that children usually engage in is being modeled by adults in many respects. So I think we really need to go back as a society and see, how do we really remodel our behavior? How do we really now do things differently? Because we can see that these children come from communities that are infested with violence and aggression. And this really makes them to become vulnerable. It makes them to think that violence is the only way to deal with issues. So I think that is one of the reasons. But also, without really insinuating anything, but we also know that there's a lot of other factors like substance abuse. We know how serious this is. This is a pandemic on its own, because every now and again you find children having access to different substances, and some of them are even kind of normal. They are ingested. We find that there are even foodstuffs that have been laced with substances, and children know this. And I think this actually calls for one to make a plea to the parents to really be vigilant, because children are no longer just having access to substances in their in the form that parents might be thinking they are. You know, a child might be having a candy or might be having a muffin, only to find that it might be laced with a lot of substances. So there's really many factors that are leading to children behaving in this way. And it still, though, really requires parents to be very, very vigilant. I think parenting has become even more complex than ever before because of all these things that children are actually having access to and are being exposed to.